month, I think it was last month, you weren't on, and I got to my second slide and I read, and these sessions will be recorded, and I thought, that's my poke-yoke. That's like my make sure that I'm hitting my record button. So you weren't there, but I did still successfully.
But there was, the process still worked.
The process still worked. Okay. All right. Let's begin. Give me a minute to share my screen. And why is that not working? There we go. Let me move everybody over here. There we go. All right, so welcome to CI Mastermind Live. We've got a couple new folks on here. So this session is recorded and transcribed, and we use the recording for LinkedIn clips that we do. So you may very well see your face and hear your voice. Zeena, I can almost guarantee that you will see your face and hear your voice on LinkedIn. We like to see your faces, so please turn on your camera. It makes it a lot easier for us to facilitate and create some good discussion. Use the chat for conversation. There's always ideas, thoughts that people have, and you may not feel like you can jump in and say what you want to say or whatever. That's fine. Put it in the chat. I'll monitor it and try and make sure that things get answered. And also encourage you to say who you are, what you do, and if any of you are in transition, looking for a job, go ahead and put that in the chat as well, because if we can help, we will. And make sure, I would say make sure especially send me a note outside of the meeting, because I'm in touch enough with enough companies, I might be able to help. Most of my contacts are in the Midwest and Chicago area, but I certainly will help if I can. So I'm going to do my introduction, which we're already doing. Zeena's going to talk about her topic, and then we'll jump into group discussion as always. This is CI Mastermind Live. We meet monthly. We usually have around 10 to 15 people on our call. We do brief learning, and we really put a lot of emphasis on giving you something that you can take back, something that you can use in your operation, in the real day-to-day of your work. So, be ready to bring up really what's going on so that Zeena or I can help give you some ideas on how to resolve it, okay? And usually we don't get through more than like 3 people on the call, but I say we typically can get through 3. I just ask that everybody, respect your peers, share as you can, help each other as you can. I really encourage that. And make sure, keep in mind, this is a public format, so, don't share things that you shouldn't share. Just a note from me here. So I have a client in New Jersey who is trying to fill 2 industrial engineering roles. They are, it's a distribution center. They're looking for someone kind of early experience. We've actually sent them a couple folks that could fit the bill, but I think they want to interview more. So if you know IEs in the, New Jersey, it's near Philly, so it's kind of southwest New Jersey. Send their resumes my way. I'll take a look at them, and if I think they're a good fit, I'll pass them along. Additionally, we are looking for some experienced labor management professionals. I'm thinking, when I say experience, I'm thinking probably 15 plus years. 20 would be nice. These folks are going to really be coaching our client on how to deploy labor management, and they're going to be on the floor helping to get supervisors and industrial engineers to know how to use labor management data. If you're not familiar with labor management, you probably don't know the person, but if you do know folks in supply chain with quite a bit of experience, That's what we're looking for. And I'm also potentially looking for 2 folks in the Netherlands. This is a contract gig, so probably 4 to 6 months. But if you know somebody, please send them my way. And in full transparency, we may end up working with another consulting firm to get this done, just because it's a pretty specialized skill set, and we're looking for someone with quite a bit of experience. Nonetheless, if you've got ideas, I appreciate them. Okay. Breaking unworkable patterns, the power of habit reversal. That is what we'll talk about in September. Scott Herbst. Oh, Scott Herbst is on. What a pleasure. Scott, why should people attend this? Other than Scott, you're on mute, by the way. Other than Scott,
really great question. Here's why. I'll bet anyone here can think of a conversation you keep having. And you just keep having, and every time you start that conversation, you think it's going to go somewhere different, and then it goes the same place, and you're not getting the results you want. And consider that that's like just a habit. So next month, we're going to look at habits and actually how to bring that to things like communication and leadership, and to move you towards what you actually are committed to versus having that same conversation again.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. And, to me, the power of this is working in today's conversation, I believe, we'll talk about some of the mechanics that go on when we try and have controlled processes, right? Some of the mechanical stuff. There's the human side that is also a challenge, right? The human side of getting people to change behaviors. And Scott has a lot of tools that we can improve how we communicate that can address those things. So thank you, Scott, and we will see you next month. All right, Zeena, you're up. Do you have slides to share? How do you want to get started?
So no slides, just very interactive, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
I did see a lot of the attendees' feedback, and before I jump right into it, though, thank you for welcoming me back. This is my second time here to talk about data quality, and I am currently at Chipotle, responsible for data governance. You may have heard of it, Little Burrito Place. And I've worked across the data space for more than I'd like to admit at this point, but across different industries, so healthcare, finance, different company sizes, you name it, tech. And data is like, it's something that is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It always comes up as a roadblock in some way, shape, or form. But a lot of data problems are actually process problems, they're business problems. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm here today, because as many of you know, as process improvement practitioners, that a lot of processes create waste, they create debt, and it's the same thing when it comes to data. And I'll pause there. Matt, do you want me to just jump into questions I saw on the spreadsheet?
Yeah, why don't you do that? Why don't you jump into, there's a few questions I highlighted as well that I like. Maybe actually there's one thing. So let's give everybody a frame. When you say data is a process problem, what do you mean, and what is often missing in those processes? Can you answer everybody that, and then why don't you jump into questions?
Yes. So typically, data is a representation of an activity. So when something occurs, you get some sort of receipt of that, whether that's your memory. So we talk about habits, right? You're storing things in your brain that then causes you to make another, sometimes like a very predetermined action, whether or not you realize it. And in this case, typically when you can't rely on a set of data, it's because it's incomplete, it's not captured, you can't access it. So always comes down to one of those three main issues. And those issues occur because there's a step missing in the process, whether that's upfront. Do you have the right onboarding processes in place at your organization to ensure that everyone who needs access to data gets the access they need to data? Do you have someone in a role that would enable them to go out and acquire the data that you need to use? Or are you not enforcing some data validation in the systems you use, and therefore people that use your systems and would be responsible for entering that data are skipping it because it's not required for entry in your system? So now you have an incomplete data set, and therefore you think it's bad data, but it's most likely incomplete or missing a step in the process.
All right. Do you want me to feed you some questions, Zeena, or are there some that you want to take yourself?
Yeah, I'm watching the chat as I'm talking, and it's absolutely true. Data is an input and an output. It is the result of the person, process, or other resource. I noticed AI came up in the chat, and anytime you want to automate work with AI, you absolutely need good data. Otherwise, as many of you can guess, bad data in obviously leads to bad outcomes. And if you want to leverage AI for process improvement, but you're relying on bad data, meaning you may not understand fully what the process is, you might be missing a step, you might be missing a person in that process, and then you put AI on top of it, you're just going to get more of the same versus having a good baseline that is based on having good data. And I see some typing in the chat too, but if anyone wants to come off mute.
So, Zeena, how about we take let's take Ryan Steinert. Did I say that right, Ryan?
Yeah. Yep. Thanks, Matt.
So the question that we had asked was, describe a process that suffers from poor data and the impact on your company. And Ryan, you said time estimates used in schedule work. Often time estimates are inaccurate, outdated, or standardized with blanket data. When trying to schedule work with this, leaves teams members without work, double booked, or doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. In the end, the work gets done, but not without massive efforts to reprioritize. So can you share a little bit of what you think maybe some of the causes are? And Zeena, can you give him ideas on how he might resolve that?
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. So I work with manufacturers across the state of Minnesota, small to medium-sized manufacturers, and they're all wanting this golden tool of scheduling, right? To scheduling their manufacturing processes out, and often we find that either blanket or incomplete data is a reason that they can't trust it. So they'll have a scheduling tool in their ERP or maybe some other system that is telling them what they need to do, but then they have to have back-end Excel sheets and different things to run kind of their own version of it because they have the wrong inputs in the ERP to begin with. So, for example, like they just say like a setup on a machine is just a standard 30 minutes across the board for every single process that they do. And that has some large implications when you're talking about scheduling. Some may take longer and some may take a lot shorter. So throwing some of those type of like that data points in there creates a massive problem real quick.
Yeah, that's typical. The system doesn't do what we want it to do, so we'll create our own tool or solution for it ourselves to make up for the system. And then that proliferates. And now when people rely on spreadsheets, the second you save a spreadsheet, it's outdated. So I've always gotten rid of any sort of spreadsheet dependent process wherever I've been. And it comes down to the software. So getting the right size estimates to, and maybe it is kind of a heavy lift in terms of enhancing the system, but the ROI is now you've significantly improved the quality of scheduling, and therefore you can be more productive. Question for you: what has happened when someone's tried to enhance a system, or is it impossible to enhance at this point?
Well, I think typically they've bought in a module or something that they think is just going to take care of it, and like a scheduling module attached a bolt-on to an ERP system, and then they don't really realize like all the data that they need to input into that to make it still work. So they end up using their old Excel systems and different things like that, which some of that data may be in the Excel system, but typically it's tribal knowledge or something that's in somebody's head that you have to get out of their mind and into a process.
So the module is basically useless at this point.
Yeah. Yep.
But your company's still paying for it.
The company is still paying for it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I feel like there's an ROI there, Ryan, and and I wanted to, and sorry, Zeena, I wanted to ask too, Ryan, like, have you looked at the cost of the, you said of the work, right? Like it gets done, but not without massive effort. There's a cost there, because I think, Zeena, what you're suggesting is you've got a right fit. You got to do a requirements activity on the process so you right fit the system, and that's costs some money, but you're losing money. So there's an ROI activity, I think, first in order to resolve that.
Right. The data problem has a root cause of a business problem, and that's the lack of ROI, the lack of requirements gathering.
So anything here you feel like you can take back, Ryan?
Yeah. I think it's, we always say garbage in, garbage out, right? If you're not putting the right data in, the system is not going to work for you. And I think you highlighted that, Zeena, of making sure you have the right data, or have solid data to work off of or baseline off of. And often that for companies, that's the hardest step to, you mentioned heavy lift, right? That's the hardest step at the beginning, is just to take that time and do those time studies and not be, working on the business and not in the business, trying to separate those two. They're trying to get things done, and they forget that they have to kind of pull back and kind of create the process first.
Yes. And one of the common themes too from the last time I was here was that sometimes you have to talk in terms of money. And that's worked for me historically because data is it's never going to be a high priority. And it's understandable because businesses need to make money and they don't see data as a direct driver to bringing in revenue.
Sure.
So getting resources to do things. But when you talk in terms of how an organization's revenue can be impacted, then people, they start to listen, they'll prioritize. So if you can attach a dollar amount to this problem and include the fact that the company is throwing money away by paying for a module they're not using, then you might find success. And of course, tread carefully. So my disclaimer is naturally, it's always a sensitive conversation too, because you're calling leadership out, but it's for the greater good at the same time.
So
Sure.
did I see, John Forsberg, do you have a question you want to ask? Because I see it says have a question.
Yeah, can you hear
Go
me
ahead.
okay?
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand the difference between data and measurement. So I can think of a scenario where I was working with an insurance company who had third-party people doing underwriting and processing new policy renewals because they update the list of people that are included. And one of their big problems was they couldn't do a quarter close because the data files transferred from the suppliers had missing data. So the accounting department had a squad of people that would go and do journal voucher corrections so they could balance the books. And the other scenario is, you're working in a factory, and I can remember a situation where they were blaming a supplier for oversized and undersized contacts in a military connector. And, I had to grab a micrometer, run out there and look at the box internally made and the box externally made, measure them myself and write all the data down a data sheet, and then do a histogram to see who really was within spec and out of spec. So that's to me is a measurement data problem versus a IT type of problem. So I'm trying to understand, are you talking about both or just the electronic part of it?
It's both. So very fluid. It depends on the use case. So for yours, and I've seen those kind of clunky, very lengthy month-end processes that pretty much start the first of a new month. And by the time the last day of the month hits, accounting has somehow cobbled together a bunch of spreadsheets and come up with this ledger to match budget, right? So that's typical. But the way you get around that is by automating, in my experience. And I have worked with accounting teams to automate their month-end process as much as possible. That way you get control and visibility, and you reduce the reliance on spreadsheets. And then for the second one, it sounds like that is a combination, that's being able to capture the right information, and then providing a method to capture the right information that's consistent, which is also a process improvement opportunity, sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to add, and Zeena, correct me if you look at this differently, but I teach it this way, so hopefully you agree. I measurement is the process. Measurement is the activities required to collect a data, right? Data is the output of the measurement process. That process includes how I might store that data, but data to me is like the thing that comes out of the measurement process. And so if I'm looking at a data problem, then I want to understand all the components of the measurement process, and then ask myself, check each one, the input activities, if there's human activities. To Zeena's point, for processes that we look at, we try to remove as much human touch as possible, because keying, measuring, like the act of using a measurement tool, all of those things increase the error of the quality of that data, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Joost had a question.
Well, it was an observation, because I think Zeena was speaking about putting a dollar number to problems related to data. I think often it's very difficult because I think when you talk about an idle tool, clear, there you can have a conversation about the cost of a tool that actually is not getting used. But if you are talking about setup, timing and scheduling, I don't know if people really understand, first of all, how much time is wasted, and then second, if anybody does a calculation about that. And I think I'm coming to it also because with all the lean practices that you teach and talk about, Matt, I guess there is a lot of tools that actually could help you somehow bring to the surface where the waste sits. Yeah, and then your lean tools actually help you then quantify potentially what is a lack of return on investment, or a cost basically for your measurement process, your data management process.
Yeah, I always say, data is not free. There's a cost to it. So there better be some value that I can describe in the data that we're collecting. And then that is partially what I'm going to use to determine the robustness of the process that I put around it.
Yeah.
I want to take Jason Stoll's registration input here, because Jason, you're in a space that's a little bit different that we don't talk about as much, and I kind of like to hear what the challenge is. You wrote suicide screening and monitoring as a data challenge in your world, and so I'm very interested to hear what kind of challenges that you have and how you guys address those.
Well, I'm currently in the middle of that project, so I just kind of finished the current state, so define, measure, analyze. So one of the gaps that was identified was, I guess, a lack of reporting or data that could be used for like a formalized review committee to measure and monitor like the effectiveness and efficiency and efficacy of that whole process. So in terms of healthcare, that is typically driven by the EMR. In our case, we use Epic. So it's a matter of defining what those holes or gaps are, and then I believe submitting requests to our IT functions to see how that can be worked into the workflows to gather and capture the required data, and then be able to pull that and output it either into like a dashboard or report, etc. So I'm still kind of like in the middle of that. I can't say I haven't addressed that yet. That's kind of what I'm working towards.
But what's the problem you're trying to solve?
Well, right now, the process is it's mostly the intent of the project I'm working on is making sure we're meeting Joint Commission standards. So it's kind of it's regulatory driven. Number one, but then also it's how we make sure that these patients are being we're giving them the proper care. And then either a patient by patient basis, but then overall, how is this overall process doing? How are we doing? To have some measures there of compliance to like certain things that we're doing in the process, screenings, our windings being done by security. Do we have these things, documented just to see how the overall process is going at various points in it?
Zeena, follow-up questions?
It sounds like you have the foundation in place. So your plan does account for capturing all the requirements, specifying what data needs to be collected. So are you just trying to do this yourself? There's no resources for it.
Oh no, I'm just a project manager. I got like at least a couple dozen people. I have like two process owners are kind of like the main spearhead. Their VP is like the executive sponsor. And so the process owners are folks in either the emergency department, they're in inpatient, they're in procedural areas. There's some HR folks, there's clinical informatics. So there's a whole pool of stakeholders getting involved with this. So number one, they make sure of their input and we're utilizing them to address this.
It sounds like you're on track and it's just a matter of timing then.
Yeah, it's just a matter of getting there. And hopefully make sure Epic can actually do what we want it to do to create like a measurement or a data point that can be measured or monitored and pulled into reports or dashboards. So
Right.
TBD, because I'm not there just yet.
And in the do what you want it to do, do you have that understood, the what we want it to do?
At this point, no, right now I'm just trying to corral all the cats to get the process like they want it, and then work towards those goals. I mean, ideally you would like to know that up front, but in terms of project chart, it was really more, how do we get this process more standardized, stabilized, and then on the back end, my goal is, okay, now that we're going to put these data and measures in place, we're going to have a formal review process. What are the goals? What are the standards that we want to go by to know whether we're improving, not improving, staying the same, etc.
One tip, not sure if you're coming across this a lot, but I have worked with different business units who have wanted different things. Specifically, I'll give you an example, mastering customer data. And so I worked for an organization that had business units which focused on different types of customers. So naturally, they couldn't agree on what a single view of the customer would look like that would be useful to them across the board. Everyone wanted their own specific version. And we did give them that. But instead, what we did is then we rolled up on an enterprise level what a customer looked like to our CEO. So if it comes down to, different departments might even provide you different data elements that become part of this universal template.
It's possible. Right now, I would say I'm kind of going through that in the form of, there are different screening tools available for like suicide risk and assessment. And there was one that was recently implemented earlier this year that's kind of being used across the board. There was a new physician that came into like the ED or ED psych, and he said, no, I'm going to use this other tool. He feels is better. They've proven they have the data to say we want to use this tool. So as a part of the future state, we're going to be using one tool on the emergency department side of things, another tool on the inpatient side of things that's maybe a little less involved. So get those policies or those procedures worked out like those stakeholders want them. Like, that's not my job to tell them what they want. I'm not a clinician. So my job is just to capture that, make sure everyone has agreement on it, and then work that into, what is the policy to make sure we're meeting our Joint Commission standards, and then into like the documented procedure, which everyone can follow. And then how does that get into training? How does that get into education? How do we capture these data gaps requirements so we can feed that to IT and work towards dashboards, reports, review committees, etc.
Right. Getting to that roll up.
And that's what it sounds like. I agree with Zeena. It's sort of like you're not a clinician, so you need to try and give them what they want. But there is some point at which you have to standardize and aggregate, or standardize to aggregate. And that probably will fall within, I guess, I don't know if it's your responsibility, but you're probably going to have to drive it.
Process owners really drive that, or my leadership within CAPS, which is like clinical advancement and patient safety. Like we report up to the corporate chief quality officer. So obviously she has a voice and input in this as well. But ultimately it comes down to the process owners, because they're the one who have to deal with this every day. And they're the ones who are experienced in nuance in, behavioral health issues. That's certainly not something I can or should dictate. So I'm just driving the project forward to completion.
So, all right. So did you get something you can use, Jason?
I think it's just more validation. I'm on the right track, especially with these big healthcare projects. There's no straight path. There's lots of twists and turns. It's kind of like the tail of the dragon. keep working your way towards the right goal eventually.
Got it. Yost, you got something you want to add? You're on mute.
I hear what you say, Jason, and of course, you're not the expert, so you don't want to make the selection. But the moment that there is a consistency of data problem, it's actually not anymore the expertise of a subject matter person that comes to the table. It's the expertise of the data manager that now gets called in. And because you don't have comparable data before a selection of tool A and after a selection of tool B. That's where the consistency of data comes into play. And then it's not so much am I an expert on the topic, but it's more about in data management, you're not able to actually, make a line chart or identify a trend, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, I'm going to move us to another question. Thank you, Yost. I'm going to move us to another question here. Let's go to Marie. You made the statement that the downtime on our assembly lines is tracked poorly. This misleads improvement teams, engineers, causing them to look at incorrect issues on the line. That is a common problem. It clouds the actual areas for improvement on the line. So when you say tracked poorly, do you have insights into how it's tracked poorly?
Yes. So we are in the middle. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Our current system, it's an internal build, which wasn't a great choice from the beginning. But it was set up for simply the end of the lines to track data on downtime. When you have a line that's pretty long, only tracking at the end of the line is pretty tough. If something goes wrong halfway down the line, you can't see that at the end of the line. So we've been doing some revamping, trying to get better data in. We ask our leads and supervisors to all enter data, but then we don't do anything with it. So part of our goal right now has been to fully revamp that system, figure out where we should actually have those monitors for entry and what stations we need them at. So that we can actually get a little bit better data. It's still operator entered, so we're still going to have room for error. It might not be 100%, but it will be better than what we currently have. Definitely hard to get the buy-in because it's more people doing more jobs, but I think if we can show some improvement projects based off the data and actually show that we're going to use it, I think we'll get better buy-in from them. So.
Zeena, any comments on that one? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking there's a case to be made for either using the unnecessary data or by not being able to use the data that you need, that you could attach a dollar value to. And it also sounds like you are taking a step back and gathering those requirements, getting the standards in place for what you need to capture and why, which is a lot farther than, most projects get when they are trying to improve data quality.
Yep. Yeah, we've definitely seen some improvements so far, even just simplifying the entry process. We see a lot less coding of none, which is just automatically coded. So they actually don't put a reason code in. So we've made slight changes just to even see some improvement, which has been huge because it gives us better direction of where to go make improvements, what machines need extra work or better PMs or that sort of thing. So.
Right. And do you have someone in a data role at your organization, or is it more the, okay.
Yep, we do. I've been working very closely with them. I'm an engineer on the lines. So I work closely with them on getting that data corrected. So.
Yeah, then it sounds like you fundamentally have everything in place and enough buy-in and enough momentum to keep getting stuff done.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
we definitely
nice.
have buy-in from the higher level. They want to see better data because they can't get anything off the data that we currently have. So I think it's just getting the lines to understand why we're asking them to do a little bit more.
Right.
There's two themes in there I'd like to comment on, and then Zeena, if you could comment on them as well. One is selecting the right tool.
Mhm.
And there, frankly, when we're helping clients, I go find experts in that space because I think selecting the right tool, you require a fair amount of depth in that specific, if it's a CRM versus a billing system versus a warehouse management system, those are all very different kinds of tools. And I think
Mhm.
finding the right expert for selecting that tool is crucial.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and then the other theme that I would comment on is the reporting. If you don't use it, the quality of the data won't matter. And it's very
Mhm.
interesting. We went through this just recently with the client, and we're pulling out timestamp data, and it's all wrong. It's all wrong. And the leadership goes, well, it can't be wrong because we use that for our costing. And we say it's all wrong. And so we show them that it's wrong, and they look deeper and they go, oh, you know what? We don't actually use this data for our costing. We use that data. It's a different data, different aggregated differently. And so no one cared. No one cared to
Mhm.
get those timestamps right because they didn't use it. So you're using a improvement team or having an improvement team following on the heels of this change is super important because they're
Mhm.
gonna start to see how the data is going in and saying, "Yep, we're getting it right, and we're starting to see new things," or we're not really it's not really telling us what we want. So, Zeena, could you also comment on both those, the usage of the data, but actually even more important, selecting the right tool? How do you go about doing that in your experience?
In my experience, it's having the use cases, knowing what problem you're attempting to solve, and having enough history to give you additional requirements. So it's, for example, selecting an MDM tool. One, it's why do we even want an MDM tool? What questions about customers are we
What's
trying?
MDM?
Master
MDM?
data management.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's fine.
Not mobile device management, but because that's another one that comes up a lot. But it's what do we want to know about the customer? What reports do we have today? What's wrong with the reports that we have today? Sometimes you have to work backwards. Sometimes you start at the bottom, or sometimes you're doing both because you're talking to a bunch of different stakeholders who want the information for their own specific reason. So that would be the first thing when selecting a tool. I really don't do it unless I understand what business value we're attempting to achieve or what capability we want to bring into the organization. So another one that I've done is with data governance, you have two facets. There's an offense and defense side. With defense, that becomes a bit more strict. You want to follow your regulatory obligations, ensure you're compliant. With offense, that's having data owners, defining data standards, data processes, establishing a data catalog, getting data stewards engaged throughout the organization to maintain those data definitions. And one of the things I've always walked into is people will be like, we just don't know what data we're collecting and why, and we don't trust our data. It always comes down to lack of visibility, lack of trust. And I really don't kind of move until I understand, okay, I hear there's a problem, but why is that a problem for you? And what does this problem mean ultimately for leadership? Because maybe you just don't like it, but it's not necessarily tied into uh, a business KPI. And sometimes organizations don't have KPIs, in which case we need to define some KPIs because otherwise you can kind of go anywhere when it comes to building a data solution.
So I want to close in a minute, but I just want to touch on this and make a couple comments myself. You said you don't move until you understand those things. Why is it so important not to move until you understand those things?
It's the waste. Yeah. The rework that comes with moving in one direction and having missed requirements.
So here's what I'd say to the group, and then we'll close out. When we send the link, rewatch and listen to that last piece that Zeena gave us. She just outlined a level of robustness that I don't often see. And I bet you all, if you look at your systems, you probably don't see either. A data steward, data definitions, right? We don't go through the work and create those things. And then we're all surprised when we go and use the data. It's actually not telling us what we want. And now we've wasted time on a tool, right? We kind of heard that earlier. And we've wasted time on analysis, potentially, to Marie's point, taking us down the wrong path. To get this, measurement is not free. This costs money, but we do it because we believe it's going to allow us to solve some problems in the long run. And to Zeena's earliest point, if we really think we're going to get all this wonderful opportunity out of AI, my newsletter this month is about AI and our experience at Chalmers Street on AI. We think we're going to get all this wonderful opportunity out of AI. We better darn well have great data sets, because that's what this thing is working off of. It's not really intelligent, folks. It's just taking things that we've already written down and regurgitating it back to us. So if we give it information that's bad, guess what? It's going to give us stuff back that's bad. Jeff Pollowood, you had your hand up.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, we have an internal scorecard, and for every milestone and metric on there, before we post it, we have a data dictionary that describes what the data is, what the data source is, any calculations, rationale for targets. So anyone who looks at the scorecard can understand exactly what the definition of that piece of data is.
How about a show of hands? How many people have that on the scorecards that they use in their operation? Raise your hand. Yes. Mostly not. So we are the evangelists. Those of you on this call, right? You take the stuff to heart. We are the evangelists. Be the evangelists inside your organization, please. Zeena, thank you so much. As always, you bring a ton of knowledge to us. A great conversation. Thank you so much to the group. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody again next month. Take care.
Great holiday.
Have a great holiday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.